As I pondered my reply in front of my TV, that Sunday night at Sullivan made it all clear to me. I took a trip straight into rock and roll a little bit, and I lost all control, and that was it. No more, no less, I guess it got the best of me. A little trip, and I was on my way. A little bit was more than I could take, and that was it. The night I saw it all, the Beatles on TV. Please forgive me, mother dear, I know it must sound strange. I need to let my golden hair grow longer every day. I bought myself a used guitar and I learned how to play, but I never learned the passing chords, they just got in my way. I took a trip straight into rock and roll a little bit, and I lost all control, and that was it. No more, no less, I guess it got the best of me. A little trip, and I was on my way. A little bit was more than I could take, and that was it. The night I saw it all, the Beatles on TV. I promised to send you a letter when I am a big jet setter. Just say you believe in me and send me all your When I was only 10 years old, that's when I lost all control.
Good evening, I'm Noel Diod and you're listening to In the Cove on Cove Runner Radio. We have with us tonight Larry Lee of the band Vinyl Kings. How are you, Larry?
I'm doing good, Noel. How are you today?
Great, great. It's great to have you on the show. How's the weather around Nashville?
Well, we got some snow last night, and it's really cold. It's about 0 right now.
You're not exactly in Nashville. What's the name
Well,
of the town you're in?
I'm in Kingston Springs, which is about 30 miles west of Nashville, so I'm out in the country.
Yeah, we like to honor small towns.
Oh, it's a good little small town.
That's
too.
where all of our listeners are.
That's true.
So we just listened to the title cut on your album, A Little Trip. Were you actually 10 years old when you saw the Beatles on Ed Sullivan that first time?
I think I was about 14, actually, so I was close.
Were you musical before seeing the Beatles, or did that just make you want to have a guitar and head off into the world of rock and roll?
I was playing in little bands, playing like instrumental versions of Venture songs and surf music and some stuff like that, for local little parties at school and stuff like that. But, the night I saw those guys on TV, like the song says, it just sort of it changed my life and a lot of other people's too.
In reading your website, which anybody listening can go to www.vinylkings.com. Vinyl is VINYL, Kings, all one word, There's a bio of each of the band members. But Larry, you headed up the bluegrass band, the Ozark Mountain Daredevils, in the late 70s, early 80s. One member played guitar with Steppenwolf on a couple songs. You got a Coral Reefer in the band, and you've all produced and played on a long list of rock, country, R&B projects for a lot of well-known artists. Can you tell us a little bit about the band members?
Yeah, I met, well, Josh Leo and Vince Malamet, who is also in the band. He didn't partake in doing the album, but he's in the band. Those two guys I met when I was in Jimmy Buffett's band back in the mid 80s. And Josh and Vince had just moved here to Nashville, where I'd moved in about 82. And we became good friends out in the road. And then Josh and I went on to start producing Alabama and Restless Heart, Juice Newton, and a bunch of other people down here through the 80s and mid 90s. And Larry Byram, who was original member of Steppenwolf, and Jim Photoglow, who did some pop albums in the 70s also and early 80s. And he's toured with Dan Fogelberg and a bunch of other people. And Harry Stinson, our drummer, he's a really good background singer here. He's sang on tons of records, and he's written songs for Martina McBride and a bunch of other people down here. Our bass player, Michael Rhodes, is like bass player of the year down here about every year. And he's played on so many records I can't even think. He's been out on the road with Winwood. So has Larry Byram, actually. They both went out on the road with Winwood. So, yeah, we've all done a lot of different things.
Well, what made you to decide to do a tribute to the Beatles? I know the obvious answer is, they were a huge musical influence on thousands of musicians, but what happened that one day that made you say, hey, let's do a tribute to the Beatles? How'd that come about?
Well, Josh Leo had been writing for Warner Chappell Music here in Nashville, and they started doing CDs on all their writers and putting all their demos on them, and to help pass around to A&R people. And Josh called me one day and said, look, I've got some songs I want to maybe do for one of these compilation records, and it's kind of Beatlish, and wanted to know if I would come out and listen to him, maybe sing some backgrounds or leads on some things. And he also got Harry Stinson and Jim Photoglow to come in, and Larry Byram to help do that. And it started off with 3 or 4 songs, and then all of us started getting into it and started writing some more things. And after we had about 5 or 6 things, we decided, let's go in the studio and do these for real, just for the fun of it, just to be able to get in and do something besides country music. And it just sort of mushroomed from there. The album actually took us about 1.5 years to do, mainly because everybody's schedules was so tied up with other things that we could only come in and work a day here and then 2 weeks later come in and do another day. So it took a long time.
And then, as you saw it as a album project, you wrote some additional songs that were along that same vein.
Yeah, once it started coming together, we really didn't know we didn't really in mind think, well, let's make a tribute record. It just sort of ended up being that way. For lack of what else would it be? I mean, we can't be thinking of ourselves as the next Beatles in reality. I don't think anybody could ever do that again.
No, that's an objection a lot of people, would have. But I certainly don't feel that in listening to this album. If I can say, love for the Beatles is pretty evident.
Yeah, we tried to do it as respectfully as we could. Even on the CD itself, we sort of thanked them, for being the influence that they were to us musically, and also just to that time period where music just had no boundaries.
I've listened to the album a lot, and it has a distinct musical flavor from various periods of Beatles music. Yet none of the lyrics are really close takeoffs of any Beatles song I can think of, except that on songs like Mother Dear, we might think of it's your version of Julia, a song written by John Lennon to his mother,
Right.
and then the album ends with the song Dreams, which has a feel of, at least in the nature of the lyrics of John's Imagine.
Right.
Were there conscious decisions?
Well, actually, there's some songs.
writing?
There's some songs on the that we recorded or wrote that we didn't put on the record because they were too close. We had a song that was kind of in a Penny Lane vein, and I'd written lyrics for that were visually a little too close to that, and we wanted to not be too overt about anything. But there's a lot of musical references.
Oh, yeah.
I think a person can have a good time just by trying to pick out, well, what's that like, or where did that kind of come from? Lyrically, for the most part, we just sort of tried to write whatever we felt like writing about at the time.
Yeah, and they work. They work as like I said, standalone songs. Some of the tunes you can hear, the French horns from the Sgt. Pepper album, and the piano discord and chaos from the ending of A Day in the Life, Eastern sitar influence from Within You, Without You, and they're not exactly in the place. I mean, they're not done right in place in the same type of song, but it's almost like you can almost play a guessing game with the album on where's that from.
Exactly.
It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to do.
There's a line in the opening song, A Little Trip, about that first appearance of the Beatles that said, "I never learned the passing chords, they just got in the way." And if any of our listeners out there are guitar players or have been in garage bands or whatever, you've gone into Beatles songbook and seen those little momentary two-finger augmented guitar chords that make playing the song a little more difficult. So, Larry, did you put in some passing chords into this album?
It probably did. I mean, we have been doing this for a long time, so we might have some musical chops that those guys might not have had when they were 20 years old, when they were first doing their first couple of albums. The thing about the Beatles, especially at the beginning, was how simple they were, yet how they evolved into this. It's hard to explain, but they just really evolved into something that was way beyond where they started.
Well, when you realize that you see old clips of John Lennon saying what were their influences, and they say Big Bill Broonzy, acoustic blues player from the South, which a lot of British bands, I guess, were, recovering their music.
Right.
And yes, at first they were, they were rockers, and by Sgt. Pepper's they ended up with these almost 30s tunes, something that you'd almost hear in a musical.
Exactly.
It's really amazing. I want to play the second cut on the album, I Took a Chance, mostly because it captures that period between around 1965, Hard Day's Night, and the two other albums before the psychedelic age of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band and Magical Mystery Tour. Do you have any comments about this song? It really is so Beatles-ish in the vocals.
It is, going back to what you asked originally about writing more songs once we got started. Once we got started on it, we did consciously go, okay, let's take a time. We need a song in this time period, and I think, like you said, I Took a Chance sort of falls in that time period around Beatles 65 and Rubber Soul and something like that. So, we did make some conscious efforts to try to cover as many bases as we could within one CD. 12 or I can't remember how many albums they did, like 12 or 13. It's hard to cover all those bases in one 60-minute CD.
Yeah, but it definitely captures that fresh acoustic sound in the vocalese that they did.
Yeah. And plus, I think no, it's the other song. There's another song where we sort of pan the vocals all the way to one side, which is what they used to do sometimes too.
Let's take a listen to I Took a Chance by the band Vinyl Kings.
I took a chance. All I did was touch you. Our second dance is when I knew I was too deep in over my own head. I tried to stop but lost my cool and said, I love you. I took a chance. I didn't know what you'd say. It's out of my hands. Even though my heart would break if you don't feel the same. My heart and mind are never gonna change. I love you. Why should I try to hide it? Why should I try to fight it? It's no good. What if I didn't say it and you were right there waiting for the words? I took a chance. I'm glad I told you, 'cause you understand. I see it as I hold you. Your eyes give your heart away, so let me hear you say you love me too. I love you. I love you.
We're back with Larry Lee of the band Vinyl Kings, featuring their album A Little Trip, their musical tribute to the Beatles. Larry, I've always been a fan of George Martin, who produced most of the Beatles recordings. When I was a teenager, I used to lay on the floor with a speaker on either side of my head and listen to Magical Mystery Tour and Sgt. Pepper's over and over again, and revel in the crossfades from left to right. Do you remember there was a car that would come in your left ear and go out your right ear?
Right.
And I'm sure it affected me for life. And then when I started playing in bands and was trying to learn guitar parts, I'd pan the fader all the way to the right, was amazed at how little musical information there was. And you'd only hear just the drums on one side and maybe a bass and lead guitar, and then flip over on the right side and you'd hear, a big fat vocal, and it sounded so thin on either side, but when you bring it together, especially the vocal parts are just so fat. Did you guys have to work out a formula, or did your engineer accomplish this, just the miracle of that kind of mix? Did you have to work at it?
I think we had. Well, we studied it a little bit. We would when we were mixing a couple of things. We might bring in a Beatles record, and surprisingly, once you take one of those records in and listen to it in the studio, you notice how sonically records have changed since those days. So we used some compressors that they used, which were Fairchilds, and also Josh and Larry Byram played through Voxes, and we tried to get some of those sounds. It's hard to do. Our main thing was to try to figure out if they were going to make a record today, what would they do? And they would use every gadget in the book. You know what I mean?
Right, and pretty impressive when you consider, at least in the earliest days, they were probably on what, 4-track machines.
Exactly, and I
Uh,
think that's a lot of the reason why a lot of those early albums were really mixed originally mono, and they were recorded on 4 tracks. So that's why you had, bass and drums and one guitar on one side and all the vocals on the others. Because when George Martin was asked, probably by the American label, to do stereo mixes, they hadn't really been recorded in a way that's really easy to do. So they were forced to have to make it stereo. They'd have to separate things so drastically. And I think if they'd probably had their choice, they would have rather had, 24 tracks and be able to do it like today. And most of the record we did, I mentioned earlier, there's one song where we did do that, panned all the vocals over to one side. But I think in this day and age, they would mix it a little bit more like records are mixed today, where drums are more or less stereo in the center, and vocals are in the center. But we did pan some things left and right drastically.
However, those 4-track machines were what, 2-inch machines? And
Yeah.
so the fidelity was at least there for them to re-record and do all that.
Oh
I
yeah,
suppose.
and Jeff Emmerich and the engineers that they used, were really good engineers, and there's some of those sounds that are just hard to get in this day and age.
I want to play another cut, Bang Bang, from your album. Bang Bang, I guess, being the sound of pushing the pre-select buttons on a radio, and actually that would have to be an old car,
An old
like
car.
maybe a 58 Buick or
Yeah,
something like that.
exactly, something like that. Now you can flick it from your steering wheel.
There you go. It's a great song. It tells the story of kind of the state of pop radio, broadcast radio, because they're all playing the same thing everywhere.
That's the wonders of Clear Channel.
Oh, do we dare say the name?
Oh yeah, I hate to, but
Well, it's something that internet radio always hopes to correct, putting a little more variety out there. And like with Live 365, we got 27,000 stations streaming, so,
I think that's a wonderful thing.
and as I told you the other day, people are listening to your songs in Suriname and Sri Lanka,
That's
so,
amazing.
you can't beat that.
No.
Fidelity's not there, but at least we get it out to the world. So let's take a listen to Bang Bang by Vinyl Kings, and then we'll come back, pick on Clear Channel, maybe the RIAA.
There you go.
But we'll be nice. We'll be real nice.
Bang, bang, push, push, go my fingers as I hit another station on the radio. Turn out, turn off, see you later. It's the same sad story everywhere I go. The more I look, the less I find. It's getting hard to ease my mind. Small talk on the classical station. Soft rock for the lost generation. Country music's in a sad situation. Who says those boots and cowboy hat can keep that kid from singing flat? All that I want is just to hear something real. A little love and some emotion I can feel. Instead of cellophane, plastic, glamorized, high-tech, pure skin, nutrient, children playing them subpar rocks on out-of-tune guitars. Bang, bang, push, push, go my fingers as I flip through the stations on my radio. A
You're listening to In the Cove on Cove Runner Radio. I'm Noel Diott, and we're here with Larry Lee of the band Vinyl Kings out of Nashville area, featuring their album A Little Trip, their musical tribute to the Beatles. So, Larry, how do you really feel about broadcast radio? Are the record companies responsible for what's being played?
Well, to a certain extent, I think, I think they let radio dictate to them what should be played, as opposed to record companies just giving them the music they wanted to do. I mean, radio, essentially, commercial radio, music is just filler for commercials. And, with Clear Channel owning so many stations anymore, it's just so homogenized anymore. You just travel from one town to the other, you hear the same songs. And, Bang Bang was kind of our little dig at that whole thing.
Yeah, I think you mentioned something. I was going to pull up the lyrics. Kind of just teenage act of the month, and felon rappers, or
right. It was teen queens with a 10-minute future, rap acts known to the prosecutors.
Yeah, that's great. I know with Clear Channel that they're even doing it with personalities to save on bucks on DJ personalities, and they're
right. I mean,
taking somebody from San Diego and making them, giving them a script for something to be plugged in up in Ohio,
right,
and making them feel,
right. Well, in the Bob and Tom show, there's a syndicated show. They're actually pretty funny guys, but I think they're from Chicago or Milwaukee or Indianapolis or something like that, but they're all over the country, in the mornings. I really like Tom Petty's song about the last DJ.
I'll have to check that out. I'm a great Tom Petty fan, but I haven't heard it. Any of his latest.
It's a good one.
Well, I know they have to recoup the hundreds of thousands of dollars they put into acts like J-Lo and Britney and even good rock bands and stuff. They have to recoup that money, and so it's all about business, like everything. I saw the other day on VH1 that among J-Lo's entourage, she actually has a nipple tweaker.
Now, I'd like to know what the definition.
So she looks perky when she's shooting her videos. She has one woman that comes and tweaks her and gets her looking just right.
That's interesting. Now, what that has to do with music, I'm not quite sure.
I don't know, but they let us know all the money and everything that was involved, and so they've got to keep playing those records.
Yeah,
they got to sell every single copy they can.
Yeah, I know, and going back to the record companies, if it's their fault or not, it's also image driven anymore, where it really has nothing to do with that much with the music. And technology is such anymore. You can take anybody and make them sound good. So now they rely, now what they're looking for is that visual image more than they are can they really sing that good or not. I think there's acts out there that have deals right now that, if you put them on stage and let them sing without devices to help them correct their pitch, you probably wouldn't have signed them 10, 20 years ago when they were still looking for people who actually could play and sing.
Yeah, and I don't know how anybody could sing with all the moves that they make on stage anyway.
They don't. It's all, it's a lot of backing tracks are used anymore. It's all about, it's all about visuals and really not that much about music.
Well, this could cover a whole show, but all we're trying to do is play some music that people haven't heard, and I'm so glad for it. And My only fear is that someday these guys will come along, the Johnny come latelys to the internet radio world. Many of them have set up their own streams, but as long as we can stay free, I mean, I'm an individual with no backing and no budget, and yet I can do what we're doing right here, and I just think that's great. That's one of the freedoms I hope that we can hang on to for ever.
Yeah, I do too. Well, I know a lot of radio stations, like major market radio stations, also stream their shows, but I mean, who cares? You know, when I get in the car anymore, you know, if I'm not listening to the classical station, I'm usually listening to the wind go by. I just can't listen to the radio anymore.
Let me play another cut. This is the last cut on the album, Dreams, and I alluded earlier to the song as to being like John Lennon's Imagine. Was that in your mind when you guys produced it?
Not really, but a couple people have said that. You know, Larry Byram and Josh and I think Larry had the music pretty much together and kind of handed it over to me, and I think he was singing in the choruses, "You Gotta Believe in Dreams." You know, that was about as much as he had of it, and I thought that was a good idea. So I just sort of took it, you know, just to try to make a positive song that, you know, no matter what, you have to keep following those dreams, and as Joseph Campbell said, I think, you know, follow your bliss.
Absolutely. Well, let's go ahead and listen to Dreams by Vinyl Kings.
Finally
We've been talking with Larry Lee of the band Vinyl Kings, featuring their album A Little Trip, their musical tribute to the Beatles. You can find more about them online at www.vinylkings.com. Listen to some of their clips from the album there's a link to another site. What site is that?
It's cdbaby.com. They're a really good independent music store. They're great. They've helped us a lot, and you can find a lot of really interesting independent music there.
I didn't go that far. I'll have to check that out. Also, we play their songs on Cove Runner Radio every day as well. And that's pretty special because we're a folk station and we play every song that we can find about sailing the ocean or whatever. But I liked the album so much, I wanted to go ahead and spread the word.
Well, thank you, Noel. I appreciate it.
Where can someone buy the album? At CD Baby?
Yeah, at cdbaby.com, and then just search Vinyl Kings and you'll get there. I think we're on the top seller list, so if you go to that list, you can find us there also.
How long has this album been out?
Well, we had them printed up. I think CD Baby got their first copies about the 1st of August, and we just now hired a publicist just because things are going so well. I mean, we're not selling tons of records, but we're getting some really good reaction from people and getting some good press and having people like you call us to do interviews and things that we decided, the key anymore is just finding your audience, and I know that there's a huge one out there for a record like this, just by watching McCartney concert on TV a couple months ago, just looking at the audience, there's a lot of young people out there too, but there's also all these people, 35, 40, 50-year-old people out there, that don't go into record stores anymore because they just don't know what to look for. They sure don't hear it on the radio. So it's through people like you and internet radio and some press people that have been helping us just get the word out, so hopefully some more people will find it.
Yeah, so if you're a big, if you've got a complete Beatles collection, and you have the anthology, and you have the anthology video, you're only missing 2 items. You're missing Vinyl Kings, and you're missing an album that I have in vinyl. It's called The Beatles, Beetles, by 4 really ugly-looking heavyset guys who covered in the 60s the Beatles tune. It was a rip-off album. I have it. Well, Larry, thanks so much for talking with us.
Thanks, Noel.
It's been really interesting, and it's an interesting album. I hope our listeners get themselves a copy so they can feel the full effect of the stereo production. We have to stream at 24 kilobytes a second so that anybody can listen in the world.
Correct.
So we have to give up that fidelity. But yeah, get a copy. It's a really enjoyable listening experience, and I think you'll really be pleased to have it. So let's go out with another cut. Leave This Town. It's got that Eastern sitar thing going on with it. Any comments on this song before we go?
No, other than that's me singing.
It is you singing on that one?
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, thanks so much again, and I hope this helps.
Thanks, Nolan. Good luck with your station.
Thanks. You've been listening to In the Cove on Cove Runner Radio, and we thank you for listening. Take care. Here's Leave This Town by Vinyl Kings.